Faster than a speeding bullet.
I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid.
More powerful than a locomotive.
An idea is like a virus. Resilient. Highly contagious.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Hey guys, Jared Moon here from Into 3 Fitness, and today we have Dr. Bryan Walsh. Now, I'm going to start by saying, when I research every guest, and I kind of dive into their background, find out about as much as I can before talking to them, where I at least know who they are. And in all my research on Dr. Bryan Walsh, I was coming up with a lot of, an expert in biochemistry, in human physiology, nutrition, detoxification, hormones, things like that. And all of those things are very interesting. And if you want to find out any more about that stuff, you could Google Dr. Bryan Walsh, and he's been on a lot of other podcasts and outlets and sources, and he has a huge wealth of that information. But the direction we ended up going, inadvertently, it's just where the conversation went, was we talk a lot about what really needs to happen, way, way beyond diet and exercise, sets, reps, multivitamins, micronutrients. We talk about the mind. And we talk about finding your purpose, and we dive into a lot of why that matters. Now, this isn't some, just theoretical, conceptual stuff that we talk about. He brings the research that's been done and how it affects your longevity and your health and your hormones and all these biomarkers. It's really incredible stuff, guys, and I really challenge you. He gives a very quick exercise to do at the beginning, and we talk about finding your purpose a lot on this episode because it's important to me. But it was really fun to talk to Dr. Walsh about all of this. So dive in, take some notes, but do. That's my biggest plea, is to actually do something with the information in this podcast. Don't just listen to it and go about your day. Sit down with a pen and a piece of paper and do that small exercise he has. I think it's incredible. I'm going to be doing it right after I finish recording this because I think it's awesome. You guys know I've spent a lot of time on finding my purpose over the last year. It's something we've talked about in a lot of different episodes. So I won't ramble on any further. Here is Dr. Bryan Walsh. All right, Dr. Walsh, I am super pumped to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So we're going to get started right away with some challenges. And I'm going to hand those over to you if you don't mind. Could you kick us off with a fitness challenge?
Fitness challenge. You know what? My wife just did a little workout herself that she liked. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but you do 7 wall balls, 7 burpees back to back as many times as you can in 7 minutes. And I like stuff like that, as you know. I mean, you've been in this for a while. But where it's short, it's easy, it's measurable. You could do it once a week. You could do it once every couple of weeks and very quickly see if you're making progress or not.
Yeah, I love that one. I think I might give that one a try. Sounds awesome. Well, actually, it sounds awful, but it sounds like, the awesome awful.
Exactly. Right.
All right. How about a mental toughness challenge?
So this is going to possibly be a little bit different, if you don't mind. It's kind of where I operate from. But my mental toughness challenge is, because this is tough and it's done mentally, but it's to determine your purpose in life. And I've done a lot of work in this space. I've done a lot of research, and one of the ways, it's not the only way, but one of the ways that somebody can try to determine what really truly is important to them, and I'll get to the sort of the punchline of this in a second, but is to imagine and really sit down and imagine. I'm going to go through this really quickly. But to get the most out of it, you take some time with it, is to imagine all of a sudden you just learned that you had a year to live, 365 days, and when that was up, you'd die a peaceful death and you would no longer exist. And in that year, as you're imagining this, you want to imagine, what does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What is your life like? Who do you want around? What would you continue to do? What would you no longer do? What would you add doing? And just spend about 2, 3, 5 minutes on that one. Then you switch it and you say, all right, well, I have a month to live. It's 30 days now. And it's no longer a year. So all of a sudden, who do you have around now? How do you spend your time? What does it look like, smell like, feel like to know that in 30 days you will completely cease to exist? Spend a few minutes doing that, and you can kind of see where this is going. Then you say you have a day to live, 24 hours. Like right now, it's 3 p.m. on the East Coast for me. At 3 p.m. tomorrow, I will be gone. What is important to me? Who is important to me? What do I want to spend my time doing in that last 24 hours? And then the final one is you have an hour left to live. So at 4 o'clock, I'm gone. What does it smell like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? What is that last hour? What is truly important to you? Excuse me. And when you do this exercise, if you do it well, and anybody that does it well comes up with the same thing, is they really truly find out what actually matters to them in their life. Now, right now, you and I, we're living this life. We have our schedules, we have our families, we have all these things that we think is important. But when push comes to shove, if you do an exercise like that and really do it, you find out what's truly important or not. And one of the consequences is you figure out pretty darn well what your purpose is. Now, coming back to the mental toughness challenge, I challenge people to do this because to me, this one thing, knowing your purpose, which I'm going to talk more about if we have the chance, knowing your purpose can make anything that you do during your day, your week, your month, to know if it serves that purpose or not. And so, when people talk about mental toughness, they usually think about discipline. What can I do to be more disciplined, to do these things that I think I should be doing? But you know what? If you have your purpose, and by purpose, I will add, by purpose, I mean that somebody can smack you at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're sleeping and say, what's your purpose? And you have an answer for them. An immediate, concise answer, your single solitary purpose in life. And so if you have that, you now have a baseline for which to measure anything else that you're doing. And I find you don't have to be mentally as tough anymore, because that's like, I don't know that you expected to kind of go there, but that's kind of it's no longer mentally tough. You're tough on the inside because you have your purpose and you know what fulfills that purpose that you're doing and what doesn't. And then doing the right things, doing the things that we think we're supposed to be doing becomes so easy because it's all dedicated towards this purpose or not. So I don't know if that made sense or that helps out with that. But it's tough to figure out, to be able to identify and in 30 seconds or less, a few sentences, define what your specific purpose is here on this planet for this lifetime. But once you have that, you don't lose it. And everything else just becomes a lot easier, if that makes sense.
No, I think that's a phenomenal exercise. I think that's really, that's something that we've talked about on this podcast a few times before, is finding your purpose and how important that is. And I love how you framed that to where it becomes your kind of litmus test for everything else and whether or not you should be doing that activity or not doing that activity. I think that's really powerful. And I would encourage anyone listening to this podcast to stop the podcast or write it down later and go through that. I know I'll go through that exercise. That was really awesome. Cool. All right. How about a book recommendation?
Well, I have to tell you, I don't know the last book that I actually read. I usually read research papers. That's pretty much how I spend my time. But my go-to book is the Bible. I think that for me and for I think most of the answers that people are looking for, if you read hard enough, are found in the Bible. Not a sexy answer by any means, but that's my go-to myself.
It's a great answer. To be honest, I don't know how many times I've asked this question. I don't know if we've ever... No, maybe one other time we've gotten the Bible, which actually surprised me when I first came up with a question. I thought it would be recommended more. But yeah, I love that. Any research papers you want to point people towards? Any interesting research you read lately that you think people should dive into?
Well, I just finished a program called Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Detoxification. And in it, I think I have something like 367 references that I used to create that course. So, no, I literally, that's how I spend my time. When I'm putting my girls to bed at night, after I'm done singing the songs that they want to hear, then I'm on my phone looking at research papers. And it just depends on the topic that you're interested in. I will tell you that on the topic of purpose, that there are some really, really phenomenal and amazing papers that are out there today, showing that everything, that having a sense of purpose, people sleep better. They actually, this is a funny one, they get more enjoyment out of their sex lives. You don't have more sex necessarily, but the sex that you do have is more enjoyable. Longevity, decreased risk of Alzheimer's disease, decreased risk of cardiovascular disease, a whole bunch of just awesome stuff. I actually did a presentation on this at a symposium not too long ago, and it was on longevity. But this topic of we could talk about diet and exercise. Well, here's the thing: you can talk about diet or exercise all you want, and it's really fun to talk about. There's so much great research, and it's kind of like mind candy, keep us occupied, and the next great thing comes out, the next great exercise tool comes out, or supplement, or diet, or whatever it is, and you look back throughout history, and that's kind of been how we are. But then, I'll just tell you about, here's a good one to kind of elaborate on what I'm talking about. So there was a paper that was, research that was done. What this woman did was she blended up this milkshake. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this study, it's phenomenal. But she blended up this milkshake, and she made these two containers for this. One of them was called Sensi Shake, and the other one was called Indulgence. Now, this was just a vanilla shake. And I think the actual calories were something like 400 and some odd calories. The Sensi Shake label basically said it was 170 calories, low fat, super healthy, good for you kind of shake. And then the other one, Indulgence, was like 700 calories. The first ingredient was ice cream, full fat, lots of sugar. And so what she did was she had the participants of the study come in, and she gave them Sensi Shake first. And she said, take a real hard look at this label, read it, understand it, know what it is you're about to drink. And then she had them consume it. And one of the things that she did was she asked them their satiety score afterwards. Like, how satisfied do you feel after drinking the Sensi Shake? And they're like, well, I'm still kind of hungry after it by and large. And then 2 weeks later, she had the same people come in, and this time she had them drink this Indulgence Shake. And again, look at the label, read it, really know what is in this, how many calories it has, how fat it is, how unhealthy or healthy it is. They drank the Indulgence, and their satiety scores after drinking that shake were a lot lower, I should say. That they weren't hungry. They felt very full and very satisfied. Now, that's fine, but she also measured a hormone called ghrelin, which is it's made by your stomach. It's an appetite hormone, essentially. The higher your ghrelin levels, the more hungry you are. The lower the ghrelin levels, the more full you are, the more satisfied you are. But here's the beauty of this study, and this goes to what I was just saying about diet and exercise, is ghrelin levels were different based on what these people thought they were drinking. But the caveat to this study was it was the same shake in both of these containers. It was the exact same shake, exact same calories, fat grams, carbohydrate grams, but yet what they thought they were eating not only impacted whether or not they thought they were full or satisfied, which is just mind over matter, but a hormone was different. And so then when you take a step back, I read something like that, I'm like, well, so could somebody eat Twinkies and Ding Dongs and Ho-Hos all day and think somehow that they're healthy and not have the adverse effects that we attribute to those kind of things? And most people would say no, because they're inherently unhealthy. But there's a lot of papers out there where they're now measuring biomarkers and finding a change just based on somebody's perception. If I can have another real quick one on that, I'll summarize it quickly. There was a couple of papers actually that looked at these women that had what's called functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, which basically was a fancy way of saying that they didn't have a menstrual cycle. Their hormones were just flatlined. They didn't have any estrogen or progesterone. And they measured these hormones, by the way, in these women. And then all they did was they put half of these women through cognitive behavioral therapy for 20 weeks. And of those women, only one didn't fully resume her cycle. All the rest of them resumed their normal monthly cycle. They measured their hormones. Their hormones went from baseline and non-existent to fully normal cycles. And all they did was they tried to reframe their condition in this cognitive behavioral therapy for 20 weeks. No drugs, no supplements, no dietary changes, no exercise, no anything. Just thinking about this in a different way, they got their cycles back. And so those are just two of many papers out there that indicate that our perception of ourselves, our lives, our sense of community, our sense of belongingness or isolation of what is actually healthy and what's not healthy. It throws a huge wrench into the whole nutritional industry, who says that you must exercise, you must eat this way, and you must do the following to be healthy, when there's some fairly compelling stuff out there that shows that if you have a decent perception, attitude, I forget the actual, forget the name I'm looking for. But anyhow, more of a not a pessimistic, more optimistic attitude, and have a sense of purpose, that those trump, in some papers, the negative effects of things like loneliness and some other things. So I guess the short version is, if you have a purpose, if you have a good, healthy perception of life and yourself and connectedness and all these things, you can actually get away with, and I'm not advocating this, a slightly worse lifestyle, and it doesn't have the damaging effects as a healthier lifestyle on somebody that lacks purpose, feels lonely, or doesn't have a good perception of things.
That's amazing. I think that's some really cool stuff. I have to like tap into, make sure I'm behind you on all your research papers. That's some pretty incredible stuff. And
well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, if I can interrupt, for me, I have to tell you that in the world of psychology, for a long time, they've been talking about some of these things. But it was kind of abstract, it was they didn't have, I need black and white data. It's kind of how I am. And so for the studies now to be coming out and to look at genetic expression for some of these things, and to look at hormones, and to look at, there's a great paper that was done on type 2 diabetics and their perception of time and their fasting glucose levels. Their glucose levels changed depending on how much time they thought had passed, not had actually passed, which again, all you have to do is read a handful of these studies, and then you throw up your hands in the air and you're like, what do we think we know that we're doing? Because it's not about the highest ORAC value antioxidant that we're taking, or whatever's hot right now. Anyhow, it really throws a big wrench. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but the data now, the research now, is taking some of these talk therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy, which by itself, if they don't measure things, is very ubiquitous. It's very abstract. It's like, okay, that sounds cool. But when they're starting to show that genetic expression and inflammatory markers and glucose and hormones are all changing solely based on one's perception, their attitude, their sense of isolation, their connectedness, and their purpose, that's powerful, man. I mean, it makes me wonder what the heck we think we're doing in the nutritional industry. It's
like, there's just this huge untapped ability in the human mind. I feel like, we probably haven't even fully scratched the surface on what we're able to do. I'm sure you're familiar with Wim Hof, and he kind of shed a little bit of light on that through his breathing and his method on actually being able to suppress his body's immune response to toxins, primarily through he just learned to control it. I think stuff like that is very fascinating, and I want to get to introducing yourself, but I also don't want to kind of interrupt the flow here. Where do you think that people should start? Obviously, start with the exercise you said about purpose, but if someone wants to work more on their psychology, or they want to, get into, should they see a psychologist? What's the starting point after you kind of feel like you have a purpose to try and work on specific issues, or is it too in its infancy to have a good starting point?
It's a super great question that I don't think has a quick answer. I'll do the best I can. And regarding the introduction, I actually hate introductions myself, and I'd rather do the intro at the end and let the content sort of speak for itself, if that makes sense. So
let's do that.
I'm totally cool with not I hate intros.
All right, perfect.
So I guess I'll try to do it as succinctly as possible. So in conventional science, in Western medicine, what they basically say is in part that our neurotransmitters impact our mood. Now, I question that to some degree, and because the body is finite in its amount of resources it can put towards anything. And so I also wonder if, however, that's flipped, and that our perception actually dictates our neurotransmitter levels. Now, I start by saying that because there's easy and there's simple. It's a simple answer. One of the most important things that we need to do is take a very serious, honest inventory of ourselves. And I think that you and anybody that's listening knows exactly what that means. This is not, in my opinion, I'm not knocking this stuff, but it's not meditating. It's not walking the labyrinth. It's not, doing EFT or a variety of these different kind of techniques or tools that are out there. It's that little voice, I think, that all of us have on the inside that most of us probably suppress to some degree, that has all the answers. And if we tap into that, and it's really hard because there's mental noise and there's outside noise, and there's just so much noise pollution, both internally and externally today. Now it's hard to tap into, but the first thing is to take a really honest inventory of oneself and just ask yourself, like, are you happy? Like, are you really, really genuinely happy? And I will tell you, most people aren't. I mean, there was a long period of my life that I wasn't until you hit a rock bottom or some things change in your life or something. But when I mean happy, I mean you don't need or want anything. You have, and if something that you have was taken away, you'd basically not be very fazed by it. And a lot of people think, well, that's like the Dalai Lama, but the dude's happy. I mean, the guy exudes happiness. And so the first one is, are you really genuinely happy? Are you really genuinely satisfied? Do you really genuinely love yourself and think that you're kind of awesome? Not on Facebook or Instagram, but deep down, do you think that you're kind of awesome? And if the answer is no to those things, first of all, you're not alone. And I think that that's why a lot of people are afraid of answering those things. But then you have to know where you are in order to get started. So, and I will tell you that it's really powerful to just be like, you know what? Like, I'm really lonely. I have a ton of friends, but I feel so lonely, or I feel unfulfilled, or I'm not happy. And that alone, Jared, that's a huge thing to admit to oneself. And I found that if somebody's willing to admit that, then and only then can you start to look for solutions. Can you start to go different directions? So you mentioned a psychologist. I'm not, again, I try not to knock anything in particular, but I've known people that have been in therapy for 30 years and they haven't changed a lick. I've also known people that hit a rock bottom, found Jesus or found themselves or found whatever it might be, and in a matter of moments, changed permanently, forever. And so, is the answer psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy is pretty awesome. There's some really great studies on that. Meditation helps some people. Journaling helps other people. Yoga, some people find themselves, finding a religion, whatever it might be. I feel like there's as many answers for people as there are therapies that are out there. If that makes sense. So I wouldn't say just head off to the psychologist, because you got to know what your problems are in the first place. And just briefly coming back to that neurotransmitter thing, there are people that have, significant, possibly there's some genetic contribution to it. Maybe it's nutrient deficiencies or there, a variety of different things that have mood issues that are really hard to overcome unless, the genetic defect is addressed or the nutrient deficiency is addressed. Or maybe some people might need certain medications to kind of elevate their mood enough so that they can actually have some of these conversations and introspection with themselves. So, it's a great question. And I said it wasn't an easy one. It's not just, like I said, there's easy and there's simple. The answer is simple. It's not easy. It takes work. It takes a lot. But I will tell you that from my own experience and having seen this with other people as well, is you're getting to the right spot when you don't want to think about it. When you start avoiding it or thinking, no, that's not the issue. You know what? If you're saying that's not the issue, there's a good chance that maybe that's what it is. And you might want to, and we avoid pain, man. That's old. We avoid pain and seek pleasure. And so we tend to ignore these things and justify them. And, anyhow, so I don't know if that answers your question, but psychologists, psychiatrists, they can work for some. Counselors, therapists can work for others. On the other hand, like I said, I've seen people that didn't have to see a person ever and just realize some of these things in themselves. And I don't think there's an easy answer. But the first thing is that deep personal inventory and really asking yourself when nobody else is listening, when you're not going to be judged by anybody, say, like, am I happy? Do I feel connected? Am I isolated? Am I lonely? Do I feel fulfilled? Do I have a purpose? Am I living up to that purpose? And just marinate on that for a little while and see what comes up. And then when you have that, then I think, then you start to have some of the directions you need to take.
And is this some of the work that you do with your patients or in your courses? Because I was looking through your website and kind of combing through it. I like to pull up as many details about who I'm going to interview as possible. And I did see you had one course about, you can't lose the weight. And
fat is not your fault.
Yeah, fat is not your fault, and you're going beyond diet and exercise. But I didn't see much more about it. Is this the kind of stuff that you're talking about, finding your purpose, or are you talking about different things beyond diet and exercises in a course?
Yeah. So fat is not your fault is, to me, it's kind of old. I've evolved quite a bit from that in a lot of different ways. But the basic premise was, well, I'll tell you the brief story. Is I come from a fitness background. My wife comes from a fitness background. We both met in naturopathic school. We graduated. We started our practice, and I didn't do anything with people when it came to fitness or even diet a whole lot. They came in with menopausal symptoms or migraines or whatever people come in for nowadays, basic stuff. And so we were doing dietary changes, elimination diet, or maybe some gut health stuff. And inevitably, people would come back in, 30, 60 days later, and be like, how's your migraines? How's your menopausal symptoms? Oh, they're good, but I've lost 15 pounds. They're like, really? I didn't prescribe any exercise or any calorie restriction, any macronutrient ratios, but yet these people were losing weight. And that's when it dawned on me. I thought, you know what? I think what we have in the diet, and again, this is sort of sacrilegious, I realize, but in the diet and fitness and nutrition industries, I think we have it backwards. And the basic premise is this, and I'll slow down for this because it's kind of, this is to me, at least where this is all at, is that our physiology on the inside dictates the response to diet and exercise and nutrition on the outside. And I'll say that again. The healthier you are on the inside, the easier your goals are to achieve when you're doing diet and exercise and fitness and nutrition. So let's make it real. Let's say there's two you and I, we both go on we want to gain a little bit of muscle and be a little bit more athletic, faster, whatever. I have low testosterone, you have normal testosterone. Who's going to get better results?
Probably
you.
Yeah.
You have normal testosterone, I have low testosterone. Is it my fault? No. Do I need to work out harder? What diet is going to correct my low testosterone? Nothing. What supplement do I take? I mean, I hate to say it, but there's no supplements to really boost testosterone, besides the fact that there's 7 different reasons why I might have low testosterone, underconversion or overconversion or the pituitary. Take 2 identical twins, women this time, that they live together, they have the same job, they work together, they eat meals together, everything they do together, they go to the gym, they get a discount, they work with a trainer at the same time, so same reps, sets, tempo, intensity, volume, everything. But one has a thyroid dysfunction. Who's not going to lose as much fat? And so when I realized this, I thought, you know what? We're trying to make ourselves healthy by doing these external things, diet, exercise, and nutrition. But, and in terms of fat loss, muscle gain, athletic performance. But I have found, and this was, so I came up with a concept and I found just reams of research suggesting this or supporting this, that the healthier we are on the inside, the better results we get, whether it's to become, bigger, faster, stronger, more athletic, leaner, whatever it might be, whatever your goals might be. And so that was the concept of fat is not your fault is, if you're overweight and you're just sitting around watching, reruns of Dancing with the Stars, eating ding dongs and ho-hos and Ben and Jerry's, then being a little bit overweight is probably your fault. But if you're doing all the right things, and listen, man, I came out with that program in this concept, people started coming out of the woodwork. The amount of emails that was like, yes, that's me. Look at my diet. Look at my exercise program, and I can't lose a pound. And I'm telling you, man, these are perfect diets and perfect exercise programs, and they weren't losing any weight. And so I really kind of hit upon this thing that is affecting a lot of people. That, and I will tell you that I have, I don't know if it's an unfortunate experience or not, of seeing a lot of sort of nutritionists in my practice to some degree. And these people are doing all the right stuff, but their physiology is a wreck. So this concept of if you eat well and you exercise, you're healthy on the inside, that's totally inaccurate. That's not true. And so that's where that whole concept came out of. To answer your question in a long-winded way, I mentioned briefly some of the mindset stuff in that back then, but I have evolved over the years to, I hesitate to say I do that with people in practice because I don't really like to go there so much with people. I mean, I'll just say that it's safer to look at lab tests. It's safer to look at physiology and biochemistry than it is trying to crack that egg of, do you have a purpose in your life? But I have started to have those conversations because I get these patients that have these folders that are, a foot thick of all the lab tests. And I look at it and some of these people, man, I'm like, you know what, there's no diet, supplement, or any recommendations I could give you that's going to make you feel better because, and I don't say it in this way, but I don't think you're happy. I think you're pursuing happiness through fitness and nutrition but they're not going to get you there. You're like, there's a deeper thing going on. So yes, I do have those conversations with people. It's not always easy. People just want to know what to take, and that's in terms of like a supplement. What can I do? But anyhow, so.
No, I think that's really cool, and I think that's something I think a missing piece really in the, I always call it the human element when I'm talking to other coaches. And you can put together these perfect programs and diet, but if you're missing the mental game from the get-go, it's nothing's going to work. They're not going to have anything in place, whether it's something as small as just a daily discipline of exercise, or their life is a wreck in their state of depression, but they also kind of want to lose 5 pounds at the same time. You got to fix the mountain of a problem before you go over to that little stick that needs to be picked up off your lawn.
Totally. Yeah, and even getting back to what we're talking about is perception. So let's say you and I go to the same coach, and they give you, both of us, an exercise program, and you look forward to it, but I hate it. What response am I going to get to an exercise program that I loathe doing? Or if they recommend eating salads all day, and you're like, sweet, I can't wait to eat salads, and I'm like, I hate salad. Like, what effect is that going to have on the inside? So there's just, it's like you said, it is untapped. And what I like, though, is that the research is starting to unravel and uncover some of these things. It takes a while to make its way into clinical practice, whether it's alternative or conventional. But people are beginning to have some of these conversations, and I think the most important piece is that awareness is being brought onto this. That the placebo effect is real. There's something called a nocebo effect. That perception is very, very, very potent. That purpose, by the way, why are people with a purpose? Why do they have increased longevity? Maybe it's because they have that purpose. That exercise is easy for them, versus someone who has no purpose. Exercise is a strain. For somebody that has purpose, eating a certain way feeds that purpose. Versus if they don't have a purpose, then it doesn't matter how you eat. So I submit, to when talking about coaching, what if we tried to help people find their purpose, like you were talking about on previous shows, and does that translate into better health habits, just as a beautiful side effect, versus trying to force this stuff on people. And we're really not going after one of the most fundamental things in the first place that would actually change everything.
So this is, you've kind of mentioned a few times, but this is new and emerging research. You said it'll take a while to work its way into actual clinical practice. But I want to know when this started coming up for you, because it was only a few weeks ago, I had a conversation with Dr. Tommy Wood, and he only briefly mentioned this at the very end. I was asked, we covered a lot of in the weeds details on micronutrients and stuff, but then at the end I was asking for some other stuff, and he mentioned, he's like, finding your purpose would be a great way to get started down this health path. And I was like,
yep.
I was like, whoa, I haven't really heard that from doctors before. And this is my second time hearing it. So is this becoming more? The research is just stronger or just newer? Where's it coming from?
Well, Tommy was in the audience of that presentation that I gave.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
I was proud. It was just a few weeks ago too. So no, he's
maybe it's fresh on his mind. Yeah.
Phenomenal. He's fantastic. I think it's a few things. One is, I think that research has been there, but it's lacked the biomarkers, like I said, sort of the proof that we need that this is actually doing something biologically in the body, and it's not just some sort of mental construct. I think that's helped. I think the fact that so many other things don't work. I mean, medicine has been chasing after different medications for a really long time that may not work as well as they'd like, and they keep thinking they're going to find the answer. Like, let's map the human genome, and then that's going to give us all the answers we're looking for. Well, that didn't work. And then, now we're going to talk about the microbiome. That's going to give us all the answers. And it never has, and it probably never will. And so I think that people are looking towards an entirely different, perspective, a different way of looking at things. And yes, I think that there's a lot more research that's being done now. When you look at some of these papers on mindfulness, on perception, on purpose, that they're fairly recent. I'd say in the past decade or so. And then what's also interesting, and you know how this works, is all it takes is for a researcher to read a piece of research and be like, wow, I had never thought of that. This is the coolest thing I've ever read. I too am now going to explore this as well. So then that person might write a research paper or something on it. And then other people hear that person. And so it's sort of this effect where where more and more people, it starts to multiply and gets its way out there. I mean, I know that I've talked about, and I'm certainly not taking credit for this, but I talked about this thought of social connectedness and social isolation on a podcast. I think it was probably a couple years ago now. And I just read research. Like I said, I go down the rabbit hole and see what I come up with. And I'd never heard anybody talking about some of these papers that I was finding. And the next thing I know, in these like functional medicine forums and conversations, that people were starting to talk about this. Now, like I said, I don't take credit for it. It might have just been kind of a coincidence that these things were happening. But that's how it works, is, you do a podcast like this, it has a certain audience, certain number of people, they hear it, they have conversations, they talk to somebody else, so I think has a lot to do with just simply awareness that this is a piece, that it has a major and potent effect. And like you said, I don't even know if we've begun to scratch the surface, quite honestly. Yeah,
you mentioned the placebo effect, and I've always had an extreme fascination with the placebo effect, because anytime I would read a study or a paper that they're like, well, we gave them placebo, but yeah, they got better too. I'm like, well, no, let's talk about that. Like, how did they do that? And, what is that? And I recently finished reading a book called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murray.
Classic.
And he talks about a lot of different things, from people curing themselves of cancer and all sorts of ailments to, a large portion of the book, the first half at least, I would say, is about health. And, the rest is kind of about wealth and other things. What are your thoughts on being able to actually heal yourself of these more aggressive diseases through the power of your mind?
That's a big question too. I believe we live in a universe of infinite possibilities, but we're limited by our mind. So, what is actually possible? Who knows? The problem with like anecdotal evidence is it's not really strong in terms of the scientific world. And so, you could say, you could take any topic and say, well, here's the classic one is, I followed a different diet and I alkalized my body and I healed from everything. And then, you have to say, well, was it, and they're real big on alkalizing the body, and say, well, was it really alkalizing, or was it the fact that you were eating more vegetables than you were eating before? Or was it the thought that you were eating something healthy and then that made you healthier, for example? So, if it's truly about alkalizing, then everybody should just be able to drink a little bit of baking soda each day and then all be magically healed of all their ailments. But everybody knows it doesn't quite work that way. So, I don't know, man. I would like to think that that's possible. I have not experienced that in my life, or anybody that I know of curing themselves from an aggressive cancer just by thinking about it. But there are stories out there, and I think we like stories, and we like to hear hope in a lot of people, or in these kind of stories, is to be hopeful for something. But so is it possible? Like I said, I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that are possible. I'd like to think that it's possible. I don't know. I don't have any hard data to support either way.
Right. Yeah. And that was just an opinion question. Because if we had papers on, swaths of people curing themselves of cancer through some mindfulness, then I think that we would be hearing a lot more about it.
Sure. Yeah. The fact that and it's not, dude, it is not even our perception necessarily. I don't even have time to get into all this other stuff, but there's a couple different types of pursuit of happiness. There's one that's called eudaimonic, and the other one's called hedonic. Now, hedonic sounds like hedonism. And so a hedonic, and this is old, this is like, some of the Greek philosophers were talking about this stuff. But a hedonic pursuit of happiness is things that make you happy. The things that, the acquiring of goods, buying yourself a new barbell or a new weight set or new whatever it is, and you feel happy because of it, but it's short-lived, so you can buy a new car and it's so great at first, but then a few years later, you're kind of bored of it. Maybe you want a new car, a bigger house, or more money, or whatever it is. Eudaimonic is the pursuit of happiness because of the greater good, so that you are contributing to this greater good, something outside of yourself, and that's where you derive your sense of happiness from. Now, it turns out, and there's papers on this, man, that our genes know which type that we are living. So you may think that you're living this eudaimonic, higher purpose sort of life, but in fact, it's really more self-serving than you'd like to admit to yourself. Your genes know that, and your genes can actually express themselves, and I won't get into all the details here, but your immune system is different based on what type of happiness you pursue. Your immune system knows if you are socially connected or isolated, regardless of how you feel about that. I have a billion friends. If you feel isolated and lonely on the inside, your genes know this stuff, and your immune system responds differently than somebody who feels connected, despite the fact that they only have 2 friends. And so, to your point was, I'll as an opinion, the fact that we have some evidence that our perception, our attitude, our purposeful life or not, our connectedness or loneliness impacts glucose, impacts hormones, and impacts gene expression. I would like to think that can go farther. That we have the capabilities of doing some pretty incredible things. I just kind of like Roger Bannister, the guy that ran the first 4-minute mile, and nobody had ever done it before. Physiologically, it was impossible, yet he seemed to manage to do it. And then after he did it, a bunch of other people did it too, because they knew that it was possible. So I believe that we have this incredibly powerful, and it's not a brain, it's the mind, and whatever is with that mind can do a lot of things. So what are the limits? I have no idea.
Yeah, and I think my personal opinion of it is that I think to be able to access that, you have to have an extreme level of being able to tap into it, whether you developed that through, I don't know, experiences in life or meditation or being a monk or however you access, that inner part, because you'd have to sit there and honestly believe it to, it would have to be very deep rooted, I think, to see any real results out of it. You're talking about these studies, people essentially getting lied to, and that's why they believe it, right? That this is good ice cream and bad ice cream, or good vanilla shake, bad vanilla shake. That they have this deep rooted belief. When you're sitting there trying to tell yourself, well, the doctor has told you have cancer, and you're sitting there trying to be like, I don't have cancer, I'm healing.
Right.
That's really hard for you to honestly believe it. I think
Totally.
Have to get to a completely different mental state.
Beautifully said, and I think that's the major difference. Is does somebody not just think it, but believe it, on every level believe? I think that you hit it on the head. I think that's a major part of that.
All right, I'm going to ask you the book question. So, say there's a nationwide curriculum implemented, and the president calls you up and says you are responsible for 1 chapter of the book. So every single child in America will have to read your chapter and be tested on and pass before they can graduate high school. What would your chapter be about?
Well, I don't think this is going to come as a surprise based on everything we talked about, but it would have to do with happiness and purpose. I mean, when I look around, at the state of the world, I feel like I feel like people aren't happy. I mean, and you know what I mean by happy. I'm not saying smiling and taking selfies. Right. I think a selfie is the opposite of happy, quite honestly. But just truly, genuinely happy. And I'll be honest with you, that happiness, another way of saying it is contentedness. And so I truly believe that you can have a truly peaceful, contented person that actually doesn't smile a whole heck of a lot. Happiness is not raucous laughter or being they're the gregarious one in the group and the life of the party necessarily. Happiness is just feeling good in your shoes and in your skin, loving yourself, really loving yourself, really thinking that you're not better than anybody else, but really thinking that you're pretty darn good, that you have, you know what I mean? And that you have in life what you need and what you want, and you really don't want a whole lot more. I think that's contentedness and happiness. And with those, I think is you have to talk about purpose, because if you have a purpose, you have this deep thing inside of you that's your goal. And I think that they're not mutually exclusive, but I definitely think that they kind of feed into each other. So that would be my chapter.
I think we could definitely agree on finding your purpose and the importance of that. And I want to ask you kind of a more personal question, because I think I read that you have, is it 5 children?
Yep. 5, all under the age of 9 at the moment.
That sounds like a handful.
Yeah.
I have 2 boys, ages 5 and 3. What are you doing or plan to do? Maybe it's too early. You said they're all under 9. To try and impart that with them, because it's obviously very important to you, and I find it very important as well. But I love to basically get some parenting advice from people who are a little further along than I am.
Yeah, well, I don't know how far along I actually am, quite honestly, but I don't think it's ever too early. And that's a really good question, man. I would have to evaluate what I'd actually do with them, because the 3-year-old, for example, she's the craziest one of the group. Holy crap, she's insane. But at her level, her ability to comprehend some of those things is not as good as, say, the 9-year-old, who's like this brilliant, taught himself how to read. He's like teaching himself coding on a computer. I don't even know what he's doing. But very different than him. And then, the 7-year-old is like this lover. This guy is just like, he is not as cerebral as the 9-year-old. So you have to approach each one of them differently. But a big one is accepting who you are and really not being flustered or care about the opinion of others. Because, that's where we start to derive our unhappiness, is when we look at what someone else has and we don't have that, then we feel unhappy. But to be happy is to be happy with yourself and to not worry about the opinion of others. And that's a hard one, man. I mean, our society is driven on that. So that's one of the things I try to impart on them. And oh man, this is a tough one, is being happy with what they have, so you get, I don't know, trying to think of what they like, but they might get like an ice cream or something, and then someone wants a second ice cream or wants a second cookie or whatever it might be, and be like, no, like the goal of life, and even if they're 7 or 5 and don't quite understand this, my hope is that it's sinking in somewhere. But like the goal is to have one cookie and to be satisfied with that cookie.
Right.
It doesn't work. I could see it in his eyes that he still wants that second cookie really badly, and basically, that blank stare that your kids give you when you're trying to have a deep conversation with them, but they're really not. The same stare I gave my parents when they did the same thing to me. I don't know. And I will say though, the strongest one is being the model, and that's the strongest influence you could possibly have on your kids, is to model happiness, to model not caring what other people think about you, to model, what it means to be a good human being. So I think that's the best thing you could do.
I think that's great. And that's, it is a quote I found not too long ago about my dad, or I feel it relates to my dad, was he didn't teach me how to live, he lived and let me watch him do it.
Totally.
And I completely agree with that. I think, lead from the front, and hopefully everything will follow from there.
It puts a little pressure on you though, right?
Yeah, a lot of pressure. It's awesome. All right. So, to be honest, this conversation has been great. A little bit different direction than I thought it would go, but I have been enjoying every minute of it. So I really appreciate everything so far, but I would like to get to the quick fire questions of the show, if that's cool with you.
Sure.
All right. What's the hardest workout you've ever done?
Well, you want to know? I'll give you a real answer. I've been lifting since, I guess, like high school. But the hardest one for me is if you've ever taken a break and getting back into it, because you want to kill it, but it's been a while, and that you're not gonna be able to walk or move anything, much less just even laugh or anything. So it's so hard because you want to do it hard, you want to hit it, but you can't, because you'll be crushed for a week and you won't be able to lift anytime after that. So that's a tough one for me. But I did, it was burpees and thrusters back to back. But it was down by 2, so it was odd numbers, like 21, 19, 7, 15, 13, all the way down to 1. That was a little tough on me. And you mentioned it was one of my favorites. That was killer. I loved it, but it kind of kicked my butt.
Sounds like fun. All right, in your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
I see, again, man, I think you probably know right now, is having the reason for doing it in the first place. Mental toughness is easy when you have a purpose. There is no mental toughness. It's either, I mean, what is it, Yoda, like do or don't do? It's just, you do things that are towards your purpose and you don't do things that aren't. And there's no discipline required because you're heading towards your purpose. And I can't stress that enough. But if you have that, discipline is a non-issue. You just do what you're supposed. If you truly have a purpose on the inside, then doing what you need to do just gets done, and there's no discipline required.
Yeah, so I've been recently dove into some Jim Rohn self-development stuff, and a big thing that he says is when the why gets stronger, the how gets easier, and
perfect. Yep.
I think that's a really true statement. Something that it put so simply, but it's so true. All right, so if you could only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It's a barbell. Not sexy, but there's so many different pieces of equipment nowadays, but just a barbell I would be completely content with.
That's a great answer. All right, the question of the show, what's the best advice you have for becoming a better human? And this is 100% open-ended.
Yeah, at this point, what am I going to say? Like, eat a healthy diet full of micronutrients, balance your biochemistry, whatever, detoxify your body. No, it just, where I am in my phase of life it comes back to that same thing. I actually didn't know how this was going to go either. I thought you were going to talk about adrenal fatigue and, detoxification, all these things, and really didn't know it was going to go this way. But that's it. That's the bottom line is, that because with that, there's certain things that if present, everything else just kind of happens organically. And if you are a happy and contented person that has a purpose, then, and by the way, purpose trumps loneliness. That's a big piece. Loneliness in the literature, loneliness is on par with increased mortality, as is being obese, drinking excessive alcohol, and smoking. Wow. So your risk of dying is you may as well not be lonely, drink, smoke, and be obese, or be lonely. It's the same risk of death, which is tremendous. Anyways, but having you could be lonely but have a purpose, and then all those negatives of being lonely just disappear. Purpose trumps loneliness, which is huge. Anyways, and again, this is an easy conversation to have, but that's it, is to have that purpose, to be content with your life, because then what happens? If you're that person, how do you think you are when someone needs to change the lane and get in front of you? You probably let them go. Why? Because you don't need to get there 2 seconds before you're actually going to get there. Or, you see somebody that needs help. I mentioned this before, that with 5 kids, my wife and I were taking them out, or the number of times that I've heard people say, wow, it looks like you have your hands full. I can't even begin to count. It happens all the time with these 5 little kids. But do you know how many people afterwards say, can I help you out at all? 0. The people, all they do is they comment and just say, and don't say it. Thanks for the comment on my hands full. I usually respond like, my heart's full too, actually, but they don't ever help out. And I'm like, well, what's the point? But if you're that person that is purposeful and you're happy, and you would be the one that helps out. You see these people because they're doing these, you can call them random acts of kindness or whatever. They're not doing good for the sake of posting it on Facebook, for example. You don't give to a charity and then post on Facebook how generous you are. You give to a charity anonymously. That's good. Does that make sense? That makes sense. It's not how you look to other people by being good. It's doing something that nobody knows that you're doing that's helping to make something better. And if that's who you are, when you talk about being a better human, what else is there? Yeah, you could answer that question 1,000 ways. You could say exercise more often because it increases serotonin and dopamine and you're a happier person, or whatever. You could talk about, eating gobs full of goji berries every day because it has loads of antioxidants. But this one, in my opinion, trumps everything else. That you will, by doing these things, that you will be a better human, and in so doing, make other people better humans, because I think this stuff is somewhat contagious and it rubs off on people. And then ultimately are making the world a better place, all by just focusing on yourself, not selfishly, but having your purpose and being content and happy with what you have. And And anyhow, so that's I think the biggest piece. I think everything else is pales in comparison.
I couldn't agree more. I think that that's really awesome that this is the direction that we went, because getting in the weeds sometimes with all the other health and fitness stuff, I do feel like if you ask the right question or ask enough questions, you're going to figure that stuff out.
Totally.
But it's this bigger stuff. Like I mentioned earlier, it's the mountain that needs to be dealt with before you get to the stick in your yard.
Well, if I can just give one tiny example of what you're talking about, and this is what we do, and I think it's to distract ourselves from the really core issues, because they can be kind of painful to think about. So I just put together this detoxification program, and part of it includes using a sauna. Now, I don't care if it's radiant heat sauna or far infrared sauna or near infrared sauna or whatever it might be. The purpose is to sweat, but that's what we do in this industry. Well, far infrared's better than near infrared, and let me list you the reasons why. No. Near, or like, what kind of water should be consumed? Well, reverse osmosis is the best. Well, how about reverse osmosis with a pH balancer? That's even better. Give me a break. Like which is your favorite type of magnesium? Whatever you can. We do that so much. Like low carbs. Well, it has to 30% carbs or 20% carbs. Just stop arguing about this stuff that doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter, especially when you look at these papers that show that perception may actually matter or have a bigger impact than what is actually going into our mouth, or what type of, if you want to lose fat, what's the best exercise to do that, or the best, stop splitting hairs about this stuff, and let's start focusing on the things that actually matter. So you're right that we do tend to focus on the wrong things, and like you said, get into the weeds, and we got to pick our heads up out of the weeds, man, and look around, because I don't think we know where we're ever going sometimes.
I couldn't agree with you more, because one thing that I stumble or fall into all the time is strength and conditioning coaches arguing with strength and conditioning coaches on energy system training, or nutritionists, paleo, vegan fighting. And I'm just like, hey, guys, like, we're all on the front lines, and there actually is a massive problem that we could help people with. Like, let's stop fighting each other.
Yeah.
And just like help as many people as we can. That's how I truly feel. But it's always like someone wants to, critique you're doing energy system training a little bit wrong, or like the deadlift, you shouldn't use the reverse grip, all this tiny crap that doesn't matter, in the grand scheme of things, that we really need to focus on helping as many people as we can by getting the information out there.
Well, and you probably do this too, but you think back in evolutionary times. So when someone was, a long time ago, was trying to pick up something heavy, did they stretch first? Did they do a few light sets of picking up a lighter rock before going for the big one, or like hoisting the deer over their shoulder? Did they, do some warm-up sets of that first? Did they have a reverse grip? Like all these things that it doesn't, I can tell you it doesn't matter, but yet that's where we focus. And so anyhow, that's funny.
Well, I did, do you want to do a quick intro now that we're at the end?
Yeah, it's an outro at this point, right?
An outro, yeah.
I guess. I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm a naturopathic physician. Went to the University of Bridgeport a number of years ago. Met my wife there. Luckiest man alive because of that. 5 kids. In terms of what I do, I can tell you that, I don't think any branch of medicine has it right. And I think that naturopathic medicine, just call it natural medicine, nutritional medicine. We do a lot of really great stuff, but we also fail at some stuff too. And I think that Western medicine does a really great job at certain things, and they also fail at things. And so what I try to do is I've kind of considered myself as a bridge of sorts, where, I take some of the things that maybe we've done for a long time in the natural medicine world, and, look at the science, really, really study the science, which bless Western medicine for having given us, to look at some of these mechanisms and really try to connect some dots and create some bridges between conventional medicine and sort of more nutritional medicine. I don't think I have a specialty in anything. I just kind of roll along and keep reading and trying to keep evolving with things. So I don't know how much more information you want to know, but that's the long and short of it.
Hey, that works for me. So I know a lot of people are going to want to learn more about you and check out your stuff. So where can people visit or go to check that out?
Probably the best place is just drwalsh.com, drwalsh.com. It's kind of a portal where there's a number of programs that I've been coming out with, and I typically post these podcasts that I do on that website, so they can listen to some things that I've done over the time. But that's the big place.
All right, perfect. And I'll link to that in the show notes. Well, Dr. Walsh, thank you so much for your time today, and thanks for being on the show.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me.
Your best. Losers always whine about their best.